Ever so often, a topic is worth reviewing as new information comes to light, or maybe the comment section blows up and, you know what, somebody throws something in there that you haven't addressed yet. And today's topic that we're going to review is the topic about Jesus being Michael the Archangel, according to Jehovah Witnesses and also Seventh-day Adventists. In part 13 of the Jehovah Witnesses series, we covered this topic in depth, and, well, as always, there's going to be some objectors, and not just from the Jehovah Witness camp, but also from the SDA camp as well. That video has done fairly well in viewership, but, of course, you're going to get some dislikes, in there as well. The comment section has filled up pretty well, but one in particular caught my eye, as he brought up a Dead Sea Scroll document called the Vision of Amram. And at the very end of this quote, it says that the Messianic figure referred to himself as Michael, the Prince of Light, and the King of Righteousness, i.e. Melchizedek. Now, recently, I did a deep dive into the Qumran material for their beliefs on the 70 weeks, and in that process, I did come across a lot of, referrals to Michael and some involvement in the eschaton that they referenced him in. So I think it's pretty good timing that, we would come off of that series for just a moment and go back to this topic. But as we go through this, it's actually going to help us in our composition debate with the book of Daniel. Now, from Qumran, we have the following works that have Michael explicitly referenced in them. And since First Enoch contains so much material on Michael and has connections with the book of Jude, that brings up Michael the Archangel, that we cover this book or the book of Enoch, that is, on Michael, in a Part B discussion. So we're going to cover the first four today in Part A, and then next week we'll cover the Book of Enoch in Part B. But as you're looking at this list, you're probably wondering, where is the Vision of Amram? And why did I just put it in red? Well, the reason is because what we saw in the comments section was a translation done by Robert Eisenman, and what appears here on Wikipedia, at least, as kind of like it's a clear-cut, straightforward statement of linking Michael with Melchizedek. And then in the New Testament, we know that Melchizedek is applied, that figure, that pattern, is applied to Jesus in the book of Hebrews a lot. Well, this translation by Eisenman is a little deceptive because Abegg and Cook, translation of the scrolls, show that those three names are missing from the retrieved scroll fragments of the Vision of Amram. So what we have here is a break in what has been recovered, and at this point what Eisenman has done is inserted what he feels was what the original author did right. Now, earlier I just said that this was a little deceptive because you don't see the traditional brackets in his translation that indicates to the reader or the readers that the words that were chosen here by the translator are actually just inserted by him, and were the lost portions, of the scrolls. So what Eisenman has done, and all scholars do this, is attempt to fill in the gap with his or her best educated guess as to what the original writer did have there. For Abegg and Cook is that you actually see the brackets, and I highlighted the other portions that are missing as well in red. So it's pretty transparent, that there's quite a bit missing here, and that's fragmented off. This is a very broken scroll, but when it comes to the names, is that two of them are pretty well knowable. And that's because with Melchizedek is that we know that one of them, or we have a really, really, really good idea that one of the three is Melchizedek, because before this, the writer has Melchi-Reshi is the king of wickedness. So the contrast here would be, Melchi-Reshi with Melchizedek. Makes a lot of sense. If you think about the Qumran community, is that they are hardcore dualists. There's good versus evil, and just, it's kind of 50-50. Ultimately, God is still, supreme. There's nobody that's equal to God, but, they're just, it's good versus evil. They're dualists. If you read through their works, it's very apparent. So it makes a lot of sense here to see this contrast in names being done by the writer. So the second noble one is the Prince of Light, as that contrasts with the Prince of Darkness. Here, Wise or Abeg and Cook, they put down, rules over darkness, or ruler in some translations, or prince, basically. We've done a lot about the word sar. The Hebrew word sar can mean prince, ruler, it's all the same thing, just, different word choice to use by the translator. But at the end of the day, the third name is a translator's speculative guess. So when Eisenman, as Eisenman did with Michael in relation to Belial, is simply not provable, and quite frankly, I suspect that he had alternative motivation here, because Eisenman, he's kind of controversial in and of himself. If you can see the title here, is that he is talking about radiocarbon dating of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Long story short is that he rejects the consensus view on how to date the scrolls, typically with radiocarbon dating, and most of the time the scrolls are dated to the time of the Maccabean period with the revolt shortly thereafter, and that's where most will say that the Qumran community, most of the time, most will say with the Essenes, broke away shortly after Antiochus's death. But what he does here is that Eisenman says that, no, I don't put him there. I'm going to put him in the Herodian period. So at least 100 years later, and then it stretches obviously into the Second Temple destruction in 70 AD. And he not just says that, but he goes as far to say that James, the biological half-brother of Jesus, is the character, the teacher of righteousness that is found throughout the scrolls all the time. And that within the scrolls is that there's an evil figure called the man of lying, and that he puts that person attributed to the Apostle Paul. And also says that the Apostle Paul was a Herodian. So you can just try to put that in your head for just a little bit, but you know what? The New Testament clearly disagrees with that. Because, in Paul's own words, is that, 3 years after his conversion, is that he went back up to Jerusalem to hopefully find reconciliation, and there he met with Peter and with James, the Lord's brother, as said here in Galatians 1:19 by Paul himself. And in the Dead Sea Scrolls is that we see them dated with the man of lying to the Antiochus Epiphanes. This is the Damascus document, and you can see here that, in 1:8 it says 390 years after Nebuchadnezzar's destruction of Jerusalem, then came the man of scoffing, or the man of lying. Well, with the Qumran community, they dated that to 560, and 390 years later is 170 BC, right at Antiochus's time. So you got two things working against you, which includes the Dead Sea Scrolls. So trying to prove that Michael is Melchizedek is questionable and quite controversial, with an author with trying to use a controversial author like Eisenman is incredibly weak for an objector to use. So we have the following text to check out. And in a very helpful way is that they actually might give us an idea of what the original writing was, or what the third name was in the Vision of Amram. First is Michael talking to King Zedekiah, and that it says here that he will make a covenant with him, King Zedekiah. Now, this might sound big, but the New Testament even says that angels mediated covenants, and even at the Mount Sinai is that they were part of the issuing of the law there. So nothing unique goes to Michael here in the Archangel Michael and King Zedekiah, which is 4Q 470. Next is 4Q 529, and that's the words of the Archangel Michael. This dialogue here is pre-flood, and nothing too notable here as well, other than we do see him talking to angels, and the angel Gabriel is also in the scene talking as well. So again, with 4Q 529, is that there's nothing here to elevate Michael to divine status, like, saying, he's God, and there's nothing in here that to equate him with the Messiah either. This leaves us with the following text to check out. The war of the Messiah is controversial because it has been referred to as the pierced Messiah, because some have translated a particular part that kind of anticipates that the Messiah will be killed. That aside, is that the text does involve the Messiah, so the question is whether or not Michael is in any way attached to this figure in the text. And what should be mentioned is that many academics see 4Q 285 as likely the ending to the War Scroll document, and after reading the text personally, is that you will get to see that that probably makes a whole lot of sense here too. But for 4Q 285 is that Michael is spotted in conjunction with other named angels, with Gabriel, Sariel, and Raphael as a special cohorts of angels. Now, what Eisenman and the other equators will do from here is frame it to the eschaton scene in a way that makes Michael the leader, and therefore is the leader of the congregation / the branch of David, i.e. the Messiah figure, that defeats Belial, Satan, at the end. And they will always try to then, kind of embed it in your head about, Daniel 12:1. It says that Michael's going to stand up at the last days, and also Revelation 12:7, with Michael and his angels taking on the dragon, i.e. Satan and his angels at that point there too. I have responses to those verses and why neither of them make Michael Jesus. But I do want to bring this up because it's the way that they are going to try to make you think, oh, wow, that does really sound logically coherent, and, kind of dot connect it in your head really basically for you. But within 4Q 285 is that it doesn't connect Michael to the leader or the branch, but actually just puts him with a group of angels, Gabriel, Sariel, and Raphael. So instead of Eisenman's filling in the blank with Michael, is that from 285 is that maybe it's the branch of David that was used instead. At least that one was, that it's explicit there, that it is connected to the leader of the congregation, or you could say, the Prince of Light. It is a Messianic title in the Old Testament. If you look at Jeremiah 23:5, you see, the root of David, a branch of righteousness unto David. Jeremiah 33:15, same kind of language there. And then Zechariah 3:8, that he calls God, that is, calls his servant the branch. So he uses it as a title or a name. But look at Zechariah 6:12. It flat out says, "Behold the man whose name is the branch." So the branch is used as a name. So at least mine has some scriptural support to it. Now, regardless, is that all that 4Q 285 says about Michael was that it just listed him with 3 other prominent angels in the scene. Now, on to the War Scroll. There's a little bit more here. Two spots where Michael comes up, and the first one is in column 9, where we see him listed again with Gabriel, Cyril, and Raphael. This is part of the reason why 4Q85 is seen as being connected with the War Scrolls, because you just see the same figures and same context and so forth, and it's like, okay, it kind of makes sense that like these are really tied together. But the next mentioning is in column 17, with a lot more said there about Michael, so we're going to read the sections about him. Today is his appointed time to subdue and to humiliate the prince of the realm of wickedness. He will send eternal support to the company of his redeemed by the power of the majestic angel of the authority of Michael. By eternal light he shall joyfully light up the covenant of Israel, peace and blessing for the lot of God, to exalt the authority of Michael among the gods and the dominion of Israel among all flesh. Righteousness shall rejoice on high, and all the children of his truth shall rejoice in eternal knowledge. But as for you, O children of his covenant, take courage in God's crucible until he shall wave his hand and complete his fiery trials, his mysteries concerning your existence. Now, this can sound Messianic-ish on its own, and I would hope that both sides of the debate here would agree that this is very similar description to that of Daniel 12:1. If you look here just at the colors, is that you see that, you got an appointed time at that time in Daniel 12:1. You got, support coming from Michael, and, in the sense that he's standing up or he standeth for the people. It's just very similar wording. Now, the next piece about Michael's authority among the gods is also playing off of Daniel 10:20 through 21, where the princes are warring spiritual beings, and the War Scroll writer is likely thinking that at the eschaton that Michael is going to defeat these guys and have dominant authority over them. Well, that doesn't help you if you are a Jesus equator with Michael, because the War Scroll writer is describing Michael in the context as not already having the highest, or at minimum, higher authority than the rebellious angels. So, are you really going to say that pre-incarnate Jesus, or Michael, if for those that say that they're the same, are you really going to say that he doesn't have ruling authority or higher authority than the rebellious angels? So, we also see that the War Scroll writer here, sorry, the L's are getting away from me today, as his wording puts Michael, as Daniel 10:13 did, as one of the many chief princes, which works not only in the context of the rebellious angels, but also with how Michael is listed with other loyal angels, just like Gabriel. Now, there's a little bit more in the War Scroll that we need to check out that is related to Eisenman's translation. But I think that we can all say for sure is that the War Scroll writer was heavily influenced by Daniel's prophecies. In between column 9 and 17 that mentioned Michael is that we see the term, the Prince of the Light, used here, and this is about the Messianic figure, and we see him having great dominion. The Prince of the Light term is likely language that is being pulled from Daniel 8, where the little horn magnifies himself to the Prince of the host and of princes in 8:11 and 8:25. And the having dominion language is likely pulled or tied to the Son of Man figure in Daniel 7:13 that comes before the Ancient of Days, who is said to have everlasting dominion over the nations after the eschaton. And in a way is that, if you're one who wants to equate Michael with all those Messianic titles, is that you could probably put this, hey, look at column 9, 13, and 17, and see how it's Michael, then it's the Prince of Light, and then it's Michael. See how those are kind of grouped together? However, is that prior to this in column 13 and column 12, is that the scroll writer used another term, the hero of war, for the Messianic deliverer. This too is Messianic, with Exodus 15:3 saying that Yahweh is a man of war. If you go through the book of Exodus, is that we know that the angel of the Lord is the one who leads them in a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire by day and by night. But we also know that the angel of the Lord is Yahweh himself. Scholars will call this the divine warrior motif. So there's a good reason, or a scriptural reason, that the Qumran writer here used this term, the hero of war. And also, as he calls the hero in that scroll, is that he also calls him the glorious one. And this is most evidently reflected from Daniel 10:5-6, where we have the glorious man figure descending on the water, standing before Daniel. And Daniel describes him with all those type of luminous descriptions, as you see here over in 1-7. You have just a lot of, girded with fine gold of Uphaz and beryl and appearance of lightning and eyes of lamps of fire. And so we just have, a glorious description of that man. So it makes sense that he's pulling from Daniel 10:5-6 there. We should be seeing that there are other messianic names that could fill in the blank instead of Michael, and were used closely together in the same context in the scrolls, whereas you do not have this with Michael. He's usually just what? Grouped with other angels. Yes, we have column 17, and kind of gives him a little props there, but that's likely just pulling from Daniel 12. But again, we're going to see why that does not mean that he is the messianic figure. And as Melchizedek in the Vision of Amram, is that we know that he is connected to other messianic titles in the Dead Sea Scrolls. 11Q Melchizedek is the big one here for us. We see Melchizedek as the messianic figure in this text, and you can also read this online for free. And here you see him is that he's going to have, the sons of heaven as an inheritance. And, we see that he is, this is an eschaton description of him going to war. And within this, we see Melchizedek as the avenger against Belial and the other rebellious angels that follow him. And that he, Melchizedek, will come with the angels of justice to fight against Belial and his angels. But the really big one is that Melchizedek is referred to as God in the text. But throughout this eschatological scroll is that there are 0 mentionings of Michael that then should only kind of lead a person to accept and believe that the Qumran community saw Michael as just another part of the group of the gods or the angels of justice who fight along the side of the Melchizedek figure. And the simple reason why they would not have equated Michael with the Messiah is because the Qumran community knew that Daniel 12:5-6 describes 3 heavenly figures in the scene here with Daniel. There is one on each side of the river. It says right there, there stood 2 other, one on one side on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on that side of the bank of the river. And then we see who there, the glorious man, as described as being on top of the waters. So, although both Jehovah's Witnesses and SDAs would try to portray Michael as the glorious man, i.e. Jesus here in the scene with Daniel, is that Daniel 12:5-6 says that there was another angel on the other side of the river. And in totality of the text and the context is that it drives us to the fact that Michael is the one that is standing on the other side of the river after helping the unnamed angel get away from the evil spiritual prince of Persia. Thus, this shows a clear distinction between Michael and the glorious man, i.e. Jesus, and the identification of the unnamed figure talking with Daniel is Gabriel. And we know this is because if you were to look at chapter 10's descriptions of that unnamed angel and you compare it to chapter 9, is that you see the same type of language of him and also how he describes Daniel in the text. If you want to see a full breakdown of this, is that I encourage you to go to part 38 of the Daniel series, where it discusses who's who in talking in the text, who's being described, because it kind of can be a little difficult to kind of track mentally, like, was the glorious man really having a hard time with the prince of Persia? No, you just have to kind of see the switch there, and then it all of a sudden becomes what it is that it's Gabriel talking with Daniel and saying that he was being persecuted and that he needed help from Michael. And then when they finally get to the river and you see the glorious man, is that's why there's 3 there and not just 2. And also, I would say is that you would need to follow that video up by watching the video on the gods of the nations, or what is titled as, what really happened at Babel, because it's going to explain to you why Michael is described as your prince, that is, over Israel in Daniel 10:20. But needless to say is that we have shown that Eisenman's filling in of Michael in the Vision of Amram is unwarranted. Reminder, hit the subscribe button below, turn on the notification bell, hit the like button, and leave a comment. And don't forget to visit us at justscripture.org. And in the meantime, stay salty.